Welcome to another episode of the Teaching Canada's History podcast. I'm your host, Brooke Campbell, and today we are speaking with the finalists of the 2024 Governor-General's History Award for Excellence in Teaching. Created in 1996, the award recognizes innovative and impactful approaches to teaching Canadian history. For more information, visit canadashistory.ca/teaching award. Today I'm speaking with Heather Howell, a special education teacher for students with disabilities in Burlington, Ontario. Thank you, Heather, for speaking with me today.
Hi, Brooke. Hi, how are you today?
I'm doing really well. Can you tell us more about your classroom and the project that you've designed for your students?
Sure. I am located out in the Burlington area, and our project is connected together with both history and horticulture. The Burlington area it used to be known as like the melon capital of Canada. So just in terms of the Burlington area has been involved with horticulture for thousands of years, from both our Indigenous treaty partners that have been many different First Nations have been in this area that have planted, from things from corn, beans, as well as tobacco, and also kind of used our rich land in terms of being around the waters, as well as our forests. So, and then when many of the people ended up coming here as the Empire Loyalists that actually settled in the Burlington area, they also ended up kind of bringing a huge horticulture history. So I am actually descendant of one of the first settlers in this area. And my family did have a farm just up on what our area is what we call the escarpment, and also down in the Burlington area. So my great-grandparents were actually celery farmers in this area. So it's kind of like this project is important in terms of our connection to our area. We are doing a horticulture project together with our local museum. We call the Ireland House Museum. And the Ireland family were one of our first settling families in the area of northern Burlington. And they actually had a very large area. And our school actually was on the original land. It was actually the cornfield of the Ireland House family. And so our project is actually in many ways kind of giving back to our community. So there's a connection together with that historical family. At the Ireland House, we are involved in working on what we call a heritage kitchen garden. So many of our families, our settler families, would have actually had a kitchen garden, close by to their, either to their summer kitchens, where they could actually kind of grow, run out and pick some beans, etc., that they would need for the night, or for the dinner, etc. Or they'd have other kind of places like potato patches, etc., where they would have other staples. With our project, our students are actually kind of involved from right from the start to kind of the finish. So kind of working on choosing what they're going to be growing to kind of dealing with the harvesting. So some of the first things that we'll end up doing is my students will actually they were learning about some of the different vegetables that would actually be used by some of our historical families, but also kind of things that they want to be able to grow. So my students like growing like watermelons and strawberries is a very, popular choice, right? So they end up using just one of our typical gardening catalogs from one of our local seed houses. This is William Dan Seeds, and they're given a list of, what are the 6 different things they're actually interested in growing for both their gardens at the school. So we have small little tiny gardens, but we have the historical garden up at Ireland House. And Ireland House is just about a 10-minute walk away. With with the choosing the seeds, they're involved in actually for some of the seeds, we're going to be kind of raising them under grow lights at the school starting in March. And then we're going to be planting everything out starting in May up at Ireland House. But we're also involved between that time period. We're involved in just kind of looking at some of the different things around our historical garden. So around Ireland House, there's a number of different artifacts, like some of the hand plows, some of the old wheels, some of the harrows, etc. Understanding just in terms of what they would have used in the past, as well as kind of like what are some of the things that we're going to be using. So we're involved in the preparation of the soil at the Ireland House, and then, of course, getting into the planting. So we're improving on our, our planting methods, right? So my students, will, one of the important things about our project is we're learning about teamwork responsibility. And so they're working together as a team to kind of plant things in, kind of in the different sections to be able to help the plants grow. And making sure that we're respecting each other and kind of listening to each other. Do people need tools to be passed over, etc.? Passed on, I should say. Many of my students are on the autism spectrum. So being able to kind of use different social skills is very, very important for them. As well as, learning how to actually kind of use gross motor as well as fine motor skills within the tasks they're actually doing. My students range in, sorry, this is kind of out of order. I should have mentioned this at the beginning. Sorry. My students, they range in ages from 14 to 21. Our program is a little bit different from high school students. Our students have cognitive disabilities and physical disabilities. So they could be having disabilities such as being on the autism spectrum disorder, Down syndrome, mild intellectual disabilities, cerebral palsy, etc., or other, I guess, kind of cognitive issues. And with this horticulture program, they are learning science, but in applied science, and they're also learning job skills. And so, we are, the one of the big goals for our program is to actually make sure that students are actually working towards things that they can actually do later on in life. So this could be job skills, as well as kind of cognitives, I guess kind of academic cognitive skills. So which such as math and literacy, as well as the interpersonal skills. So this project that we're dealing with actually kind of pulls in all of these different things in an applied ways. So with literacy and math, so for instance, math, my students, they would be involved in measuring out the garden, like how many square meters do we actually have? How much can we actually fit into this area? How much soil would we need for this particular area? We'd be using numeracy skills, literacy skills. So literacy skills would be things like on a package of beans, right? Reading all the different, steps and instructions in the back of the packages. Our interpersonal skills are involved in sharing of tools, kind of, what are the next things we need to actually do, and job skills that would be connected to, looking around, what needs to get done, have we left any tools behind, the steps that you actually need to be able to do to get the tools from the shed to kind of putting away the tools, etc. So it's a very involved project. And I guess I was just out, later on, kind of in June, after a planting, we would do, I guess, the first bit of harvesting, and we continue on actually doing the harvesting. And I just finished coming out from the garden this morning. So we had about 13 pounds we have our tomatoes, hot peppers, and what else did we harvest today? Zucchinis and cucumbers. So lots of different things that we're pulling out of the garden. But potatoes are, other products we've been bringing in, lettuce. Broccoli was the other thing that I also brought in today. So, and all the different foods that we're actually harvesting ends up going not to the Ireland House or to our school, but it actually goes to our local charity, which is the Burlington Food Bank. So we are the kind of like one of the gardening areas for the Burlington Food Bank. So for the supporting horticulture gardens for the Burlington Food Bank.
That's amazing. I love that community connection, and it just
Yes.
it's so fun too, right? On top of this being this really holistic and hands-on learning experience. I know you weave lessons about history as well throughout this work. Can you share more about what aspects of historical thinking your students are really able to deepen throughout this project?
So that's the aspect of historical thinking. We talk about continuation and change. So we'll talk about kind of just in terms of what did they actually use in the past, in terms of harvesting, plant, kind of tilling the soil. What are some of the crops that they actually would have been planting at the time, and how has it actually changed to now? So I'll give an example in terms of for my students, if we're going to actually kind of improving the soil using, kind of some type of fertilizer, what are we actually using now? So our students are kind of seeing me, or and have actually used at the school. They've been using a liquid fertilizer that we can buy at Canadian Tire, etc. But what did they use in the past? And we've talked about at the Ireland House that how they would have actually had animals. What do the animals actually produce? Of course, manure, right? And this is actually what they would have used within the soil to actually ameliorate the soil. So, and the same thing with some of the equipment. And we've gone down as a class, we've actually gone down to the Joseph Brant Museum, which is the sister museum to the Ireland House Museum. And at Joseph Brant Museum, they actually have a beautiful display of horticulture in the past in Burlington, and they actually have some of the pieces of equipment that we don't use, like a scythe, right, or a hay rake, etc., that is mounted on the walls, right? And so my students can actually see what did they use in the past, right? What are we using in the present in terms of tilling the soil? So one of my students loves using something we call a U-bar, right, to be able to till the soil. And we also have equipment, some of the kind of the Harrows equipment that are still there, just on the property of the Ireland House Museum. So with my students, I we don't we're not using kind of like the standard kind of history textbooks and everything else. Many of the students have difficulty in terms of literacy, right? Many, a couple of my students are nonverbal. So our my historical project, it's a very hands-on type of stuff. We're learning through kind of like seeing and doing versus kind of doing a lot of the writing that your typical history class would actually end up, learning about.
Yeah, that ties really well, I think, into my next question, which is talking about what resources then do you like to use to help support this? You can talk more about the hands-on elements, but what else do you go to when you're trying to supplement your lessons or whatnot?
I know, stuff I would love to kind of actually use a lot more. It was more of the historical sea catalog. So my students have actually seen some of the historical sea catalogs down at the Joseph Brant Museum. We had a chance to actually go into the back to the archives to be able to see some of the things. I'm hoping that we'll actually have a chance to be able to go to the Canadian Centre for Horticulture, History, which is over at the Royal Botanical Gardens. They have an amazing collection of seed catalogs from many of the different seed houses around Canada and beyond, places that of course, have disappeared. And so it's being able to kind of use seed catalogs is one of our primary tools, but it's also kind of using what do we have actually on the property of the Ireland House Museum in terms of the tools and seeing some of the old pictures and actually with, the house itself. And also kind of going down and seeing, the archives down at the Joseph Brant Museum, as well as seeing the display at the Joseph Brant Museum of Horticulture in Burlington. It's neat. I know one of my students there's a nice picture of all of the young men that used to work at the Ireland House. So it's the farm hands, and my students kind of just in terms of the relations. Those young men in the photos are basically the same age as what my students are. So they're doing it. So it's kind of like it's a return to history, right? So they can kind of associate that they're on land that's kind of producing food, but the people that were working on the land were this, same similar age as them.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it's so cool that they're doing this on site. It's not
Yeah.
just the gardens at your school, which is amazing as well, but going and doing this on where this would have happened with people their age, like all of that just really cements so much connection and learning. When you take a step back and you look at the project as a whole, what impact would you say that it has on your students' learning, and what are some of the outcomes that you've seen for them, but also for your community?
I think, I guess the importance of our project is our students actually being connected to their land. We're on, you know, historically, the place where we're working on this garden has been worked by by people for thousands of years, and so they're kind of getting rooted to the environment that they're actually where they're living in, and understanding that people have been here before, and just in terms of kind of giving back to their community. So there's people that have built their school, etc. Right, and so now they're actually kind of also giving back to the greater community through their it's essentially kind of a volunteer work. It's coursework, but they're also volunteering because the food that they're producing will actually kind of go to the food bank. So it's a win-win situation. They're giving back to to the family in some ways, like weird convoluted ways, to the family that actually owned the land. I know at one point in time they're learning different skills, they're producing food, that food then goes to the Burlington Society ends up kind of giving back to them. So it's so the students kind of are able to kind of gain that 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 rootedness within Burlington. But I guess the other things that what they love and they really appreciate is being able to kind of get out, move, and it's a different scene. So they're not stuck at school in a classroom. They're moving around. They're actually kind of getting to be able to see their neighborhood and seeing kind of what's going in the neighborhood. They're able to kind of see new people. So we'll end up having some of the people that work at the museum kind of coming in and checking out what's going on. The neighbors within the area. So the next door neighbor to the Ireland House, he'll come over and see what the kids are, what are doing. And the same thing with visitors. Every once in a while, there'll be visitors to the Ireland House. They're from the local area, or they'll be from, like outside of, outside of Ontario, and they'll see kind of like what's going on. So it's a neat, it's a really really neat project. And for many of the parents, they're grateful because their students are getting a lot of good exercise, but it's also giving them skills. And our parents are really, really hoping for our students to actually kind of really gain some of those important life skills and job skills for when they do graduate from our program. So this is definitely kind of building up a lot of those, those different skills that they actually need.
Thank you, Heather, so much for sharing more about this project and the wonderful work that you've been doing in the classroom and in the community.
Thank you. Thanks, Brooke.